question was probably more specifically to David Matthews. I wanted to first thank you for your speech tonight. I would certainly be willing to invest more than $30 in your government program.
Whenever we need more money, we'll come to you.
Given that we know that not all, but majority of perpetrators of domestic violence and violence against women are male, and given the comments that Mary just made about male rates of suicide, clearly there is something quite toxic in the way that our culture is communicating and learning masculinity. And I was just interested, outside of your program for those men who already identify as perpetrators, are there plans to look at a more targeted, specific preventative programs for, communicating masculinity and learning masculinity, maybe more in much earlier in life context? And I guess to the rest of the panel, what for you does a preventative program, a best practice program look like in terms of combating toxic masculinity?
Look, thank you for that question, and I'm sure Martin will have something about that, because a lot of his discussions are with young men about the concept of masculinity. On one level, you can really simplify a lot of this, saying if people stop using violence, and men stop using violence, then a lot of the problem would go away. So I think that there's a growing awareness that we need to look at why people are using violence and how they use violence and the attitudes that underpin how people use violence and other forms of controlling behaviour. It's interesting that the general view is that there's not a lot of evidence about what works for perpetrator-based programs. That is, there's no silver bullet there about what you can do to change men's behaviour. Their willingness to change and their acceptance that their behaviour is unacceptable is a clear starting point. We've had over the years a number of prison-based programs, for example, which are compulsory programs, and men often go through the motions and nod their way through courses or give back the information that they believe they've been told in order to get the tick to have a positive behaviour report or whatever. So we've got to learn a lot more about what works in the space of men's-based programs, and looking at what we can do to see men as having to take responsibility for themselves, but also for their peers. And I think what men can do within peer groups is also incredibly critically important, and we haven't talked about that lot, but the behaviour, as David Morrison said, the behaviour you walk past is the behaviour you accept, and that's often behaviour that happens amongst men themselves in male-only groups, and what men do in those environments is very important. There are lots of really good programs that understand that men themselves have had a lot of complexity in their lives, including often early childhood abuse or being victims of family violence themselves. They've got, in many cases, mental health, drug and alcohol, acquired brain injury, a whole lot of complexity in their lives. So we've got some excellent organisations, including Everyman in Australia, who are working in the ACT, offering counselling and therapeutic interventions. But you mentioned about masculinity and modern views or expanding views around gender. There's a lot of discussion around gender at the moment, which is great because it opens up a much wider discussion around what people want to identify with as their gender. But I think it allows a lot more permission for men to feel more comfortable about having a version of masculinity that they actually want to live. And it's suitable to their values. One thing I think a lot of men can do at a very basic level is take a very active role in parenting. I think if men can do that, that is the best possible role model and relationship that they can form with their children, and can have all sorts of other positive effects as well.
Like I said earlier, and I will only add to that if we are raising our sons and daughters as equal citizens, as equal human beings, they will understand that behaving like that to each other, even in a relationship where one person is culturally appropriately making these compromises, is not on. And the other thing is that a lot of time there is no recognition. In my own household, we were talking about sexual harassment in Pakistan, and both my husband and his cousins, they were saying, never ever in our life we have ever done that. So I asked him that if a larger majority of women in Pakistan who have used public transport or who have been in public space have experienced sexual harassment. Who are those people? Are they coming from Mars or Venus that none of us has done it, but all of us have experienced it? And this is where we need to actually see beyond our immediate family, that if I hold on to my father as my role model, in any given context, he would not do any wrong, and then stand up for something without understanding that we need to stop that. Mother saying that my son could never do it, or daughter saying that my father could never do it, or my brother could never do it. We need to accept that as human beings, we are not perfect beings. But to do something good and to live in harmony with each other, where we do not actually be violent towards each other, we need to accept those behaviors as wrong, unacceptable behaviors. By accepting that, they will become part of a solution and not part of the problem.
I think in terms of toxic masculinity, the biggest issue is that our young men are taught that they have to be on top, that they have to be the top dog. And if they look around them at role models, again I come back to movies, but I also look in the world of international affairs, I look at the world of business and politics. Again, I think that one of the reasons of the gender inequality in politics is because it's such a nasty business with men shouting at each other. My daughters and I played a game during the recent federal election on the 7:30 report, and we counted how long it would take before the two men would start shouting over Lee Sales or whoever it was, and the best one we had was 50 seconds before they started shouting. So young men have these role models, purportedly, who are saying that masculinity is all about winning. Masculinity is all about winning at all costs. Donald Trump actually comes out and says that. If you want to win and be successful, don't have any friends. I think he's doing a good job at that at the moment. But
is he the man who's going to be next president?
so, but these are the role models that our young people are accepting. Now, two things happen. One is they think they need to be on top, and they will fight other people in their family, on the schoolyard, in their jobs to get on top, and they will do that through whatever aggressive means they can. But then we also see what I think is the same, a different side of the same coin, which is young men who take action against themselves because they think any admittance of failure means that they are a complete loser. And unfortunately, we see in the schoolyards, somebody who admits a weakness gets hammered by their so-called friends. And what we're trying to do is go through schools and teach this new masculinity, that you can be vulnerable and be strong, that the tough guy is actually pretty weak because he's hiding behind this very thin veneer of toughness, that it's okay to cry. And it's why we use people like the Raiders football team. We get big burly prop forwards talking about how they're scared, and the young guys are just slowly starting to get this message that it's okay to be vulnerable, that I don't have to hit somebody to prove my manhood, that I can be vulnerable, I can cry, I can show emotion and still be a man. But it's going to take generations before we can fix it.
Next question.